Bikers mock a silent man in a diner. When he speaks, they turn pale. In the heart of a forgotten highway, nestled between endless stretches of dusty roads and fading horizons, sat a quiet little diner. Its unassuming exterior belied the countless stories that had unfolded within its walls. Tales of weary travelers seeking respite, of locals gathering to exchange gossip and laughter, and of the occasional lost soul searching for a way back home. On this particular day, the diner's tranquility was shattered by the roar of motorcycles tearing into the gravel parking lot. A group of bikers, notorious for their ruthless ways and infamous reputation, dismounted their chrome steeds and sauntered inside, their laughter cruel and mocking. The patrons, mostly locals accustomed to the bikers' intimidating presence, kept their gazes fixed on their plates, hoping to avoid drawing unwanted attention. However, one man remained unfazed by their arrival. Seated in the corner booth, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, he seemingly paid no heed to the commotion. The bikers, led by their brutish leader, Reaper, scanned the diner with predatory eyes. They relished the fear they instilled in others, feeding off the power that came with their notorious reputation. As Reaper's gaze landed on the solitary man in the corner, a wicked grin spread across his face. Well, Reaper drawled, sauntering over to the man's booth. Looks like we got ourselves a mute. What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue? The man remained silent, his eyes fixed on his coffee, as if lost in contemplation. Reaper's grin faltered slightly at the lack of response, but he quickly recovered, determined to assert his dominance. Hey, I'm talking to you, Reaper snarled, slamming his palm on the table. The dishes rattled, but the man remained unmoved. You deaf or something? Or just too much of a coward to speak up? The other patrons watched the exchange with bated breath, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the bikers' cruelty knew no bounds. They had seen it countless times before, the way Reaper and his gang relished in tormenting those they deemed weak, reveling in their own twisted sense of power. Yet, amidst the tension, there was something different about the silent man. His composure, his unwavering calm in the face of Reaper's taunts, hinted at a strength that belied his unassuming demeanor. As Reaper's frustration mounted, the man finally lifted his gaze, his eyes locking with the bikers. In that moment, a flicker of recognition passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of a shared past, a history that had yet to be unveiled. The man's name was Elias, and his silence was a shield he had learned to wield long ago. Born into a world of chaos and violence, he had grown up in the shadow of his father's legacy. A man revered by the community for his unwavering commitment to justice and his fierce protection of the weak. Elias's father, a legendary figure known simply as the Shepherd, had stood as a beacon of hope amidst the darkness that had once plagued their town. With his quiet strength and unshakable moral compass, the Shepherd had united the community, leading them through trials and tribulations, always guiding them towards the light. But the Shepherd's path had been fraught with danger, and his unyielding stance against those who sought to exploit and intimidate had made him a target. In a cruel twist of fate, he had been taken from them, his life cut short by the very evil he had fought against. In the wake of his father's death, Elias had withdrawn into himself, his grief and anger burning like a relentless fire within him. He had sought solace in the silence, finding comfort in the solitude that allowed him to keep his father's memory alive. Years had passed, and Elias had grown into a man who carried his father's legacy in his heart, even if he rarely spoke of it. He had taken up the mantle of protector, watching over the community from the shadows, intervening when necessary, but always maintaining his distance. Now, as he sat in the diner, facing the man who embodied the very evil his father had fought against, Elias felt a stirring within him. The silence that had once been his refuge now felt like a weight upon his shoulders, a burden he could no longer bear. Reaper, oblivious to the history that lay between them, continued his barrage of insults and taunts, his voice growing louder and more aggressive with each passing moment. The other bikers joined in, their laughter harsh and grating, filling the diner with a cacophony of cruelty. But Elias remained steadfast, his gaze never wavering from Reaper's. In that moment, he saw not just the man before him, but the countless others who had suffered at the hands of those who wielded power through fear and intimidation. And so, with a voice that had been silent for far too long, Elias spoke. Enough! The single word, spoken with quiet authority, cut through the din like a knife. Reaper, caught off guard by the sudden interruption, fell silent, his mouth agape. Elias rose from his seat, his presence suddenly seeming to fill the entire diner. Gone was the silent, unassuming man who had sat in the corner. In his place stood a figure of quiet strength, his eyes blazing with a righteous fire. "You think you know power," Elias said, his voice steady and unwavering. "You think you can control others through fear and intimidation. But you know nothing of true strength." Reaper, his ego bruised by Elias's defiance, sneered at him. "And who the hell are you to lecture me about strength, old man?" Elias met his gaze, unflinching. "I am the son of the shepherd." A collective gasp rippled through the diner, as recognition dawned on the faces of the locals. The shepherd's legacy, though rarely spoken of, was deeply woven into the fabric of their community, a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of adversity. Reaper, however, remained unimpressed. "The shepherd," he scoffed. "Never heard of him. Sounds like a weak old fool to me." Elias shook his head, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "My father was a man of true courage. He stood up to those like you, who prey on the weak and vulnerable. He showed us that real power lies in compassion, in unity, and in the strength of our convictions." As Elias spoke, the atmosphere in the diner began to shift. The locals, once cowering in fear, now sat up straighter, their eyes shining with a newfound sense of purpose. They had lived under the shadow of the bikers' reign for far too long, and Elias's words had rekindled a spark within them, a spark of hope and defiance. Reaper, sensing the change in the air, grew increasingly agitated. He was not used to being challenged, let alone by a man he had deemed weak and insignificant. "You think your little speech is going to change anything?" Reaper snarled, taking a menacing step towards Elias. "We run this town, and no one, not even the son of some dead hero, is going to stand in our way." But Elias remained unperturbed. He had faced far greater threats than Reaper and his gang, and he knew that true strength lay not in the ability to instill fear, but in the courage to stand up for what was right. "You're wrong," Elias said, his voice ringing with conviction. "This town, these people, they are stronger than you realize. They have endured hardships and challenges that you cannot even begin to fathom. And they will not be intimidated by the likes of you any longer." As Elias's words hung in the air, a murmur of agreement began to ripple through the diner. The locals, emboldened by his presence and his message, began to rise from their seats, their faces etched with determination. Reaper, realizing that the tide was turning against him, retreated towards the door, his gang following close behind. But even as they fled, the seed of doubt had been planted within them, a realization that their power, once seemingly unshakable, was nothing more than a facade. In the days that followed, a change began to sweep through the town. Elias's words, spoken with such quiet conviction in the diner, had ignited a spark of hope and resilience that refused to be extinguished. The locals, once divided and fearful, now stood united, their shared experiences and struggles binding them together in a powerful way. They began to speak out against the injustices they had endured, their voices growing stronger with each passing day. Small acts of kindness and bravery rippled through the community, as individuals stepped forward to lend a helping hand to their neighbors, to stand up against the remnants of Reaper's gang, and to reclaim the streets that had once been ruled by fear. Elias watched from afar, his heart swelling with pride as he witnessed the transformation taking place before his eyes. He had always known that the strength of the community lay not in any one individual, but in the collective spirit of its people, a spirit that had been dormant for far too long, but was now awakening with a fierce determination. As the town began to heal, Elias found himself drawn to the old community garden, a once vibrant space that had fallen into neglect during the bikers' reign. He spent his days tending to the soil, planting seeds of hope and renewal, nurturing the delicate shoots that emerged from the earth. The garden, much like the town itself, slowly began to flourish under Elias's gentle care. Flowers bloomed in a riot of color, their petals reaching towards the sun, a testament to the resilience of life in the face of adversity. As word of the garden's revival spread, others began to join Elias in his efforts. Young and old, they came together to plant, to water, to weed, each small action a symbol of their shared commitment to building a better future. And amidst the laughter and the camaraderie, Elias found a sense of peace that he had not known in years. The silence that had once been his shield now gave way to the gentle murmur of conversation, to the sound of life and growth and hope. As the seasons changed and the town continued to heal, Elias knew that the time had come for him to step back, to allow the community to take the reins of its own destiny. He gathered the locals in the heart of the garden, the very space that had become a symbol of their transformation. As he stood before them, his eyes shining with pride and emotion, he spoke the words that had been weighing on his heart. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, "you have shown me, and each other, the true meaning of strength. It is not about power or intimidation, but about the courage to stand together, to lift each other up, and to never lose sight of the hope that binds us all." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces before him, faces that had once been etched with fear, but now glowed with a quiet resilience. My father, the shepherd, knew this truth. He dedicated his life to protecting this community, to nurturing the seeds of hope and compassion that he believed lay within each and every one of us. And now, as I look out at all of you, I see that his legacy lives on. Not in me, but in the spirit of this town, in the unbreakable bonds that you have forged with one another. Elias took a deep breath, his voice wavering with emotion. It is time for me to step back, to entrust the future of this community to you. For you are the guardians of this place, the keepers of its heart and soul. And I have no doubt that you will continue to grow, to thrive, and to build a world that is filled with kindness, with understanding, and with love. As Elias's words faded into the gentle breeze, a hush fell over the garden. For a moment, it seemed as though the very earth itself was holding its breath, absorbing the weight of his message. And then, as if moved by a single unspoken thought, the crowd surged forward, enveloping Elias in a sea of embrace. Tears flowed freely as they clung to him, their hearts overflowing with gratitude for the man who had shown them the way, who had rekindled the flame of hope that had once seemed all but extinguished. In that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a warm, golden glow, Elias knew that his father's legacy would endure. It would live on in the laughter of children playing in the streets, in the kindness of neighbors helping one another, and in the quiet strength of a community that had learned to stand together, no matter the odds. And as he looked out at the faces of those he had come to love, Elias knew that he had found his true home, not in the silence of solitude, but in the beating heart of a town that had finally learned to embrace the power of its own voice. As the years unfolded like the pages of a well-worn book, the once sleepy town nestled along the forgotten highway continued to write its story, a tale of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of community. A decade had passed since Elias stood in the heart of the garden, his words igniting a spark of change that would transform the lives of all who called this place home. The seeds he had sown that day, both literal and figurative, had taken root, flourishing into a vibrant tapestry of growth and renewal. The community garden, now a cornerstone of town life, had expanded far beyond its original borders. Lush greenery and colorful blooms stretched as far as the eye could see, a testament to the love and care poured into every inch of soil. Children played among the verdant patches, their laughter carrying on the breeze, while their parents and grandparents tended to the plots, sharing stories and wisdom passed down through generations. At the center of the garden stood a simple wooden bench, weathered by the elements but still standing strong. It was here that Elias could often be found, his eyes closed in quiet contemplation, a small smile playing on his lips. Though he had long since relinquished his role as the town's guardian, his presence remained a source of comfort and inspiration to all who knew him. The diner, too, had undergone a transformation. Once a somber refuge from the harshness of the world outside, it now buzzed with the energy of a community reborn. The clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation filled the air, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional clinking of glasses raised in toast. Behind the counter, a familiar face presided over the bustling scene. The woman who had once cowered in fear now stood tall, her eyes sparkling with the confidence of someone who had faced her demons and emerged victorious. She moved with the grace of a dancer, pouring coffee and serving up slices of homemade pie to the hungry patrons who filled the booths and tables. Among those patrons were faces both old and new. The locals who had once kept to themselves now sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing stories of triumph and hardship, of love lost and found. They spoke of the changes that had swept through their town, of the way fear had given way to hope and despair to determination. And then there were the newcomers, drawn to the town by whispers of a place where compassion and kindness reigned supreme. They came from all walks of life, seeking solace, redemption, or simply a fresh start. And they found it here, in the embrace of a community that understood the power of second chances. Even the bikers, once a symbol of intimidation and cruelty, had not been immune to the winds of change. Some had left, their hearts heavy with the weight of their past deeds, seeking absolution on distant roads. Others had stayed, shedding their hardened exteriors like snakes molting their skin, eager to discover the person they could become in the light of a new dawn. They found work in the fields and factories, in the schools and shops, their rough hands now put to use building rather than destroying. They learned the value of honesty, of integrity, and of the simple joy that comes from knowing one's worth lies not in the fear they instill, but in the good they can do. As the town continued to grow and thrive, its residents faced new challenges and opportunities with the same spirit of unity and determination that had seen them through their darkest times. They banded together in times of crisis, lending strength to those who faltered, and celebrating each victory as if it were their own. And through it all, the memory of the shepherd and the legacy he had entrusted to Elias remained a guiding light. It was there in the kindness of a stranger's smile, in the gentle touch of a comforting hand, and in the unwavering belief that even the darkest night must eventually give way to the dawn. For the town had learned that true strength lies not in the ability to dominate others, but in the courage to lift them up. That power is not measured in the fear one inspires, but in the love one gives freely. And that the greatest legacy we can leave is not one of wealth or fame, but of the lives we touch and the hearts we change along the way. And so, as the sun rose and set over the town that had once been forgotten, its residents knew that they were part of something greater than themselves. They were the keepers of a flame that would burn bright for generations to come, a beacon of hope in a world that so often seemed consumed by darkness. For they had seen firsthand the transformative power of compassion, of unity, and of the indomitable human spirit. And in the warmth of that light, they knew that they would never be alone, and that together, there was nothing they could not overcome. As Elias sat on his bench in the garden, surrounded by the fruits of his labor and the love of his community, he knew that his father's legacy was in good hands, and he smiled, content in the knowledge that though the road ahead might be long and winding, they would walk it together, step by step, until they reached the dawn of a brighter tomorrow.